Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Thursday, April 10th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce, and they're available on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that webpage and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, that will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Just click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And we encourage people to listen to those even repeatedly, and that can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words HeartLand Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that, before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you choose to tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app. That app contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It also contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process. And it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we would appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment or a testimonial from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archive for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that's just beyond words easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. If you're listening to us on the internet at live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're choosing to share some time with us. And from that perspective, you cannot type in a comment or talk to us live. So if you want to do that, you go to your app store and download the app. It's called Needle, N-E-D-L. It's also named an AI tuner for live radio. And it has all kinds of access to live radio, but it also gives you the option to either type a comment into the app while we're live on the air, or press the phone button and actually have a voice-to-voice conversation with us. So we encourage people to do that. I view each of these shows as an interactive an opportunity anyway for interaction. And whatever you have to share is valuable, and we will treat it as such with as much respect as we can generate. Even if I seem to be in the middle of reading something or doing a monologue, we encourage people to type a comment in the app or press the phone icon to let me know that you want to speak directly, voice to voice. And the reason I encourage that so strongly is that if you look back at the archives or the special pages that Jeanie has curated out from the last 14 plus years of Mindshifters radio shows, which has been running for 14 plus years, 1 hour a day, 5 days a week for the first 8 years, and 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for the last 6, what you'll find is those shows that have been singled out and curated out as best of or highlight shows, they're almost exclusively shows in which people like you have called in and asked a question or been stepped through a worksheet process or given a testimonial which has led to some discussion. So, there's a real solid history behind how the contributions of listeners make this show beyond words better. So please let us know how we can best serve you, and let us know how it's going for you if we are reading something. For instance, for the past couple of weeks, we've been reading a book by Christian Sundberg titled A Walk in the Physical. And I've been interspersing that with readings from a book about how we create our emotions and the secret life of the brain. And there are times when I'm reading and going into these things because it stirs up something in me, or I jump back to the book about how emotions are created because it makes sense the way my mind is working, and I never know if that's going to coordinate with the way your mind is working. So please let us know. We have plenty of time for questions or comments today, and again, if you have any difficulty using the app, you can email Jeanie, Jeanie, at whyagain.org, and she's got all kinds of good reference material for you to explain to you how to open up the app, use the app, or she can forward any difficulty you're having to the creator of the app. So where we left off yesterday, reading from the book A Walk in the Physical, was with some discussion about how the learning that our spirit comes to earth to do is not intellectual learning. As a matter of fact, there are some people who believe that the intellectual processing that we do and accumulate while we're here is more of a distraction than an actual asset. But the learning that we come to do is experiential. We come here to experience ourselves and our neighbors as our true essence, this energy of creation that some would call love, as it expresses in form, and we're called to try and remember that and express only that, even when, as Michael Ryce would say, the stress is up and the chips are down, or as the Way of Mastery would say, even when the walls of the building are crumbling around us, and or the bank account has been emptied by some scammer. And as we practice remembering our true nature as love and extending that true nature to others with energies and words and actions that we might call compassionate or respectful or gentle or loving or whatever, we get better and better at doing that in more and more difficult situations. The next section in the book that we're reading, A Walk in the Physical by Christian Sundberg, is the section titled Roman numeral 12, Higher Spiritual Natural Law and Local Natural Law. And Christian writes, in the unfathomably vast wisdom and unconditional love of our source, capital S, source, creation unfolds in accordance with divine laws, or what we might call, quote, natural laws, close quote. Just a few categories of the natural laws, or at least, as he says here in parentheses, or at least the perceivable expressions of those natural laws, which are not separate but are interrelated. They're mentioned here briefly. So he's going to talk about the laws of the physical universe, the modifiability of the physical universe, the law of attraction, synchronicity, karma, etc. The first one he talks about is the laws of the physical universe. The laws of the natural physical world, and he says this includes physics, biology, quantum mechanics, etc., are simply one layer of natural law that governs how physical objects consistently behave in our local physical universe. One physical reality experience is transpiring because of the process that are occurring in higher dimensions. These are also in turn governed by the natural laws of their own. The next section is the modifiability of the physical universe. He writes, the physical universe responds to the intentions, thoughts, and beliefs of the individual and the collective. Intent has the power to, quote, nudge, close quotes, the probabilities of how physical reality unfolds. These processes do not conflict with the laws of the physical universe. Rather, they are a part of them. Next, he talks about the law of attraction. The law of attraction is the name we use for the phenomenon that energetically, and thus eventually also physically, meaning our energetics, our intention, our mind energy, as Michael Ryce calls it, is a creative force. And, so thoughts become things, so choose the good ones, as Mike Dooley would say. So, the law of attraction is just the name of the phenomenon that we use for this phenomenon of how energy becomes physical reality. And we tend to experience what we resonate with, what we are focused on, and what we are intending. He writes, the vibrational attraction occurs at the being level of the individual. And he calls this, in parentheses, true intention. It doesn't occur in the surface thoughts or the ego stories. In our local physical experience, the law of attraction is helpful in part because it allows us to, quote, get what we fear, close quotes, which supports one of our universe's goals of allowing individuals to face and overcome their fears. So Dr. Michael Ryce, he was talking about this even yesterday. He talks about it frequently, but the idea that the universe is set up to come and kick you right in the limitations. It's not to punish you for your limitations, but to help you become aware of how you've falsely come to believe you have limitations and you're holding on to those false beliefs. And as you become aware of them, it presents you an opportunity to release them, to dismantle them, or you might say to integrate them. That's the same thing that Christian's talking about here. In our physical universe, the law of attraction is helpful in part because it allows us to get what we fear. If you've been around Dr. Michael Ryce in the past 14 years of his internet show or his, whichever of the workshops he's done, he pulls out the story of Job, and he talks about how the biblical story of Job contains this wisdom, that if we pour a lot of mind energy into fearing that something will happen, we will tend to resonate that into being, into experience. Not as a punishment, but so we can recognize that pouring our mind energy into fearful thoughts is off the mark. And here, Christian says, this supports our universe in helping us have an experience so that we can do what we came here to do, which is overcome our fears. Then he writes, meanwhile, distinction in higher systems is often not geographical, but vibrational. Similar beings or similar energies tend to group together. Next, he writes about synchronicity. He writes, synchronicity represents the natural flow of how events transpire when the spirit is, quote, followed, close quotes. And here in parentheses he says, when the spirit is permitted to flow freely. When that happens, greater intelligence can function naturally. Synchronicity happens when we are, quote, in the flow, close quotes, which tends to happen when we follow where love guides us, where we follow our excitement, where we practice allowance and surrender to the reality inside or apparently outside of us. The universe is always willing to work with us. Synchronicity, as it's described by Jung, is this idea that we're connected emotionally, energetically, fundamentally, and most of the time things are working in a flow that's going to bring us a better ultimate outcome. And yet, if we say we want life to go in a different direction, we experience strife and struggle and resistance and upset. And yet, this synchronicity is always going on. But if we're stuck in our thoughts of how things should be, if we're stuck in judgment, if we're stuck in comparison, we don't often see it. An example of synchronicity is one Dr. Michael Ryce has given a few times lately, where he was doing a breath session, a deep breath session, and he was given some insight about his bloodline and his ancestry, and he was asked, will he do the work necessary to help all of his bloodline clear up their pain, fear, and sadness kind of thing. And he heard himself say out loud, yes, I'll do that. And immediately as he did that, his phone rang, and it was his son, and his son was saying, hey, Dad, I'm on this, this ancestry website, and I need some information from you about our bloodline, our family, etc. And Michael says, he and his son had never had any conversations about that kind of thing. That's an example of synchronicity. That's an example of the energetic, some would call it a psychic connection that we have with people, even those that we're not directly related to in a bloodline. One of the stories that I used to tell more often over the years, it's dwindled from my awareness, but it comes up at a time like this. I was in psychoanalysis. I was being analyzed by a Jungian psychoanalyst. And I was about, 2 years into it, going every week. And one of my best friends at the time, Her name was Pat, and she was also in analysis with a different Jungian analyst. Oddly enough, both the analysts that we were going to see worked in the same building, a 45-minute drive away from where we lived. So that was just weird that we ended up there. One day, the deal with the psychoanalysis back then was that you would agree to pay for every week, and you would pay whether you went or not. And so you never skip a week. It's like this ironclad thing. It's something about commitment and safety and knowing it's going to be there. And at one day, my friend Pat was just going about her daily life. She had two teenagers, an older daughter and a younger son, but they're both in their teens. And she was struck with this panic that something was wrong with her son. And she called the house. This was long before cell phones, so the only way to get somebody is when they're at a payphone or in their house on a wired phone. And she called and no one answered. And she kept calling and no one answered. And she was struck with such panic that she drove to the house. And she got in the house and she started calling. They have a 2-story house. And she went all through the first floor and calling for her son, and he didn't answer. And she ran up the stairs and burst into his room, calling his name, fearing for the worst. She had this sense that he was feeling suicidal, that he was going to hurt himself somehow. And she was panicked that he might have hung himself in his room, with no previous hints of that in him. He hadn't been acting depressed. She was just overwhelmed with this. And as she burst in his room, she found him laying on his bed wearing a pair of headphones with music blasting so he couldn't hear that she had come in the house and had been yelling his name. And he took his headphones off and said, "Mom, what's the matter?" And all was well. The next day, she was supposed to have an analysis session with her psychiatrist. And what never happened in the 3 years that she'd been going to him was they called and said, he can't meet with you. She found out a week later that the reason he couldn't meet with her was because his stepdaughter had committed suicide on the day that she was overcome with fear and panic that her son might have committed suicide. That's what Jung is referring to as the synchronicity. That is that psychic, spiritual, energetic connection that we form with people. And it's a big part of why people encourage each other to act on your impulses. When you think of someone on a regular basis, 3 or 4 times in a day or a week, even if you haven't talked to them in years, act on that. Reach out. Send them a letter, give them a call. These days you can type a text, type an email. Just tell them you're thinking about them. You don't have to say, "Oh, I'm scared that you might have something bad happening with you," because it works with energy, intense energy, whether the energy might be labeled by a human being as positive or negative. And so it doesn't have to be that something bad has happened to the people that you care about. And yet, if you think of them on a regular basis, people who do this kind of work encourage you to act on it. Reach out to them. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you're sending blessings, whatever you want to do. So then the next section he's talking about here is karma, to get back to the book with Christian Sundberg and A Walk from the Physical. And the section is titled Karma. And he writes, "We are fully responsible for every intent, thought, word, and action. All choices yield a result for the individual. This, quote, energetic result, close quotes, remains with the individual even past the physical death. Love-based and fear-based choices yield a result that may lead to various heavenly or hellish experiences in the realm of form, whether on Earth or in other reality systems or in other incarnations. This, quote, energetic accountability, close quotes, is not a system of punishment, but is rather energetic cause and effect and vibrational consistency for the sake of long-term being level growth. You as a being have an intention, even if you're not consciously aware of it, to be more loving, to get better at expressing your true nature, which is loving, love, the stuff that the universe is made of. Creative, expansive, procreative, you might say. At a being level, that's what your intention always is. And this system of energy, whether you call it synchronicity, you call this part of it karma, means that as you do something, in our Newtonian physics, they talk about how every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's how you might view karma. And it happens at this fundamental energetic level, at a being level, and so it helps my being get feedback about whether I'm moving in the direction I want to move in or I'm moving away from the direction I'd like to be in. He writes, this system is built on wisdom and unconditional love. This is true even as a given ego or a given separate self, one who thinks of themselves as separate, may suffer or reject a particular experience or circumstance. In other words, we can't escape being what we actually are. And through this energetic logic, what we are guides us into future experiences. From the higher spiritual vantage point, we ourselves often choose to re-engage what we call the darkness, close quotes, darkness, of what we have actually been, so as to evolve past it and expand in due measure. When I read that last paragraph, I flashed on an interview I did with a woman not very long ago. And she's had, I don't know, multiple bouts of cancer. And the thing that resonated this thought into my experience is, here's the title of her book. Her name is Sherry Ann Tom. It's Shariann, and her last name is Tom, Tom. The title of her book is The Call of Cancer. Now, most of us hate the idea of cancer. Most people who talk about cancer say how much it sucks, etc. The Call of Cancer, the subtitle is A Loving Pathway to Wholeness, Healing, and Transformation. Now, most people would not want to look at anything like a broken ankle or a car accident or a diagnosis of cancer as a loving call to anything. So this is yet another example of the power of the interpretation I choose and apply in terms of a response to what life brings me, and the power of that to actually craft or create my experience in life. How could somebody think that getting cancer is a call, a loving call to wholeness, healing, and transformation? Well, I don't think you can unless you have the kind of perspective that Christian Sundberg is presenting us here. And he writes in that last paragraph, in other words, we can't escape what we actually are, and that's okay. It's all okay. Like everything is going to work out just great, just fine, better than we could imagine. We've talked about how some people have tremendous difficulty even hearing those words without choosing to generate anger and upset. But in other words, whatever we are and our true nature and how it's unfolding just produces an energetic feedback loop so we can see where we are in the process. Michael Ryce does a lecture titled The Circle of Life and How to Play It. And I think that's the one where he has more words written on the board than any other 2-hour workshop. And he talks about a high road and a low road. And he talks about when an event happens, we can choose the high road or the low road. We can choose to interpret it from a high road perspective or a low road perspective. We can choose to respond from a high road perspective or a low road perspective. And what we choose to do determines how we experience it and where we end up. And in that process, he says, look, this workshop and all of the board writing about it, the writing he did on the board about it, can be used like a roadmap. And then at one point he stops the lecture and he says, if you want to reach a destination, and let's say we used to have AAA, and people would go and get triptychs and maps that are all marked out to get where you want to go. He said, so what's, the two most important things to have as data points for where you want to get someplace? And most people raise their hand and say where you want to go or when you want to leave. And he says, yeah, but you got to remember that it's critically important to be able to tell the people who are mapping it out for you where you're starting from. Let's say I want to go to Seattle, and I go into the triptych, and I tell them that I'm in Houston, Texas. And they get me a bunch of maps, and they send me out the door, and I get in my car, but I'm in Miami, Florida, and I can't find any of the roads. Why? Because I'm not in Houston, Texas. I'm in Florida. I need an entirely different process to get me to Seattle. Think of what he's talking about here in terms of the energetic feedback and synchronicity and karma, not as punishment, but as the feedback that allows us to get where we want to go as a being, as a true self. Nice deep breath for Timmy. So the next section, since I don't see if there is one, if somebody is typing a comment or has a hand up, I apologize for not being able to see that and respond, but the app isn't showing it to me now, so I'll keep going with the book. The next section is titled Roman numeral 13. It's titled The Spiritual Path While Human. And Christian writes, spirituality is not about believing something or doing something. Isn't that interesting? I mean, doesn't that just, if you slow down and think about some of these words in these books, spirituality is not about believing anything or doing anything. It's about evolving one's consciousness and evolving one's nature of their being towards love. The doing comes after the being. This pure, fundamental, soul-level intention precedes action. Spirituality is about one's relationship to the present moment. As that relationship becomes more genuine and less hampered by fear, one's experience of joy increases and one is able to be of greater service to others. And I read that and I flash on 6 years ago, 5 years ago, about 5 years ago now, I had a car accident. I was driving to work one day and somebody smashed into my car from behind and on my left side so hard that it lifted my car up onto the two right wheels, and then I slammed back down and it shattered my driver's side window. Now at that point in time, I'd been at least 15 years of practicing the idea that whatever happens is just fine. And so as soon as I realized that I was not badly injured, I got out of my car and started asking myself, okay, what's mine to do here? How can I be a blessing to myself and others? And the way that entire rest of the day unfolded, I never could have scripted. My conscious logical mind still marvels about it, and it included me connecting with one of the drivers that was 17 years old that caused the accident, that fell asleep at the wheel, that totaled 4 cars. Thankfully no serious injuries or death was caused. The process for me at an intellectual level was not trying to figure out anything. It was that I just kept asking myself silently inside my own mind, what's mine to do here? And then someone would show up in front of me and I would just interact with them. This idea of just asking to be shown how to be a blessing to myself and others allowed me to be of greater service to others in that situation than anything else that I could have done. I've been in a lot of situations in the past where my thoughts were racing and I thought, well, I'm a psychologist and I should, or I'm the dad here and I should do this, or I'm the rightful owner of this or that and I should do this or that. And those things have never gone as well as my life has gone since I've just begun the practice of asking moment to moment, day to day, what's mine to do to be a blessing to myself and others in this moment? And that's what he's talking about here as a spiritual path. He goes on and says, spirituality is about finding exactly what is. He puts what is in caps. Spirituality, that would be what Michael Ryce calls capital T truth, the actuality of what actually is in life. And he writes, spirituality is about finding exactly what is. Spirituality, he writes, is not primarily a pursuit of any certain form. And by form here, he means acquisition of any thought, etc. He writes, true accomplishment is not a matter of achieving some physical end, but true accomplishment is the expansion and actualization of love. Capital L love, this energy of creation, this extension of your true nature. True accomplishment is the expansion and actualization of your true nature. Now, he sees that as so significant that he cites 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different short essays that show up later in the book to highlight how important that thought is, that true accomplishment is about the expansion and actualization of your true nature as love. He writes, a spiritual person interacts more successfully with the world of form. That is, an evolved individual is generally better able to wield a loving intent within these various contexts of form, better able to utilize whatever arises in form for the expression of their deeper nature, and better able to use form for the betterment of others. An evolved individual's presence tends to be, he has in quotes here, net additive. The state of the world is our responsibility, both collectively and individually. Meditation is a process by which the individual may move toward meeting the present moment as it actually exists, unfeathered beneath the associations with form. Meditation is a process by which the individual may slow down their own thought momentum sufficiently so as to be able to experientially know their deeper nature, and he writes here in parentheses, and allow their deeper nature to rise back up to them on its own, close parentheses. Meditation is not truly an action or physical activity, but it is a utilization of intent to meet the present moment as exactly what it is. Human society is currently largely ignorant of our real, larger context. However, the individual is never separate from our true source of knowing. So, what's the spiritual path about? According to Christian and the guides that have informed his work, it's about finding a way to extend and express more fully your true nature as love and be of greater service to yourself and others. And not of service to yourself in terms of what you can accumulate in the way of form, but service to your higher being self in your goal of expressing more fully, more deeply, more vibrantly in each moment your true nature as love. Now, the next section goes directly against what Dr. Michael Ryce would call regulatory speech. Section Roman numeral 14 is titled, You Are Loved. And Michael Ryce would say, love is not a verb. It's not something anybody can do to you or you do to somebody else. So if you just take the D off of that word, it's better regulatory speech. You are love. You are this energy of creation expressing in form. You are source energy and therefore always connected to your source. And so to read this with better regulatory speech, according to Dr. Michael Ryce, we would say, you are love. You are deeply and profoundly appreciated and cherished. And then it says, you are this energy of love, and you grow as you receive that awareness and you receive that energy from others extended to you. And you find joy and vibrancy and expansion in your life by extending that loving energy. You are a creative, powerful, free being who has committed to all that this physical experience entails, and you do it all for joy and freedom and love. I think even though Sherry Ann Tom, the author of that book, The Call of Cancer, may not have had this specific set of writings in her mind, but she's using that same approach. Even cancer is something she approaches with joy and freedom and love. And I believe she's had cancer 4 or 5 times already in her life. Christian writes, you can never lose the love that Source has for you. In other words, you can never be disconnected from your Source, which is love, and you are love. You are love, and you are celebrated not just by Source, but also by countless other beings who are your family and friends. Please try to remember that while you are here in the wilderness, while you are here in the physical, operating through the veil of amnesia, of forgetfulness. So that's the first part of the book, A Walk in the Physical, by Christian Sundberg. The second part of the book is these 166 essays that he has, categorized by theme. Now, the numbers referencing these essays have been sprinkled all through that first part as I was reading it. I just didn't interrupt it to read each number, and I only read a few of them just to give you an example. So he has themes, and he has these categories of essays arranged by theme, and so it comes to me to say, I'll read some of these categories, and I'll ask people to chime in which theme would they like to hear about. And you can either send me an email or type a comment in the app or, press the phone button. So the theme categories are love, love as the healer, healing through feeling, personal, now. The individual's relationship with the present moment as a way to heal the world. Or the present moment as the point of power. Or change in consciousness precedes change in the world. Or the small stuff is the big stuff. Or challenge as a gift. Or life as feedback. Or negative emotions as guideposts. Or the theme of no enemies. So someone has asked for some essays related to the category of present moment as a point of power. So we'll start reading. I'm not sure we can get through all 4 of these. There are 4 different essays related to that. The first one is, you have power. And the essay reads, fundamentally what we are is conscious awareness. Fundamentally, what we do is exercise our intent by making choices. Put another way, the fundamental substance is consciousness. The fundamental force is intent. So just think about that. Your true nature is consciousness, and the force that you exert is your intention. These statements are true no matter what reality system we're in, and no matter how many things may currently appear to be, quote, outside, close quotes, of us. Consciousness may elect to participate in experiences that provide rich constraints, like Sherry Ann Tom having 4 or 5 bouts of cancer. Those rich constraints in which difficult choices may be made. Physical reality is one of the meaningful constraint sets itself. Just being in the physical, even if you're, basically healthy your whole life, being in the physical means you're constrained by time and space and interactions with others who may or may not know themselves to be loving. Even here, because focus is part of the intent, focus itself is a creator of momentum. When we focus on a certain perception, that perception grows. Physical reality is meant to give us the opportunity to have the experience that our nurtured perceptions yield to us. Physical reality is designed to give us the opportunity to have the experience that those perceptions we value and nurture give us. There's a Course in Miracles line that says, your upset is going to persist only as long as the thought that gave rise to it is cherished. When you choose to release your belief in or the value you've attached to a certain thought pattern, all the negative effects of it vanish. He goes on and writes, it's valuable to recognize this phenomenon because it allows us to take our power back. You might ask, how does that allow us to take our power back? Well, because we can move away from perceiving the world as a place that happens to us and gradually shift our perspective towards recognizing that, in fact, the power lies within us. Dr. Michael Ryce has this in one of his older worksheets. There's a line that's highlighted in bold, and it says, the truth is, my reality is strictly internal, it's unique to me, and is created out of my own thoughts. So, Michael Ryce has been tapping into the same knowledge that Christian's writing about in this essay. The power lies within us. This may seem like a big leap in such an immersive and challenging environment. And indeed, this reality can take time to institute substantive internal or external change. In other words, we don't instantly transform things most of the time just because we intend to. However, we do have the power to change our momentum in every single now moment. Now is always the moment. We can choose now to focus on the good instead of the bad. We can choose now to dwell on the love in the world, not the fear. We are not powerless to our circumstances. However, we are in fact powerful creators who are able even to commit ourselves to the temporary illusion of being powerless. Despite the appearances, we always have the power to change the stage of the play. If you have relinquished your power in your mind, it's okay to take it back. Become familiar with how you are perceiving your experience. Choose to focus on the positive, even as you fully acknowledge and allow that you might have identified as the negative. Your awareness is the root of it all. Change the momentum of your experience by intentionally choosing what you focus on and how you decide to interpret what happens in your life. You, as consciousness, have that very real power. It's time to remember that you do. Now, I created this, I didn't create, but I assembled this two statements. Hey, I'd like to let you know something about yourself as a human being. The first thing is, you have the infinite capacity to choose the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment. That's the first thing. If you're human, if you're having a physical experience, you're a soul, you have the infinite capacity to choose the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment. The second thing is, it is the choice of the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment, which is actually creating your experience of life in that moment. Nothing else creates your experience of life. It's always your choice of how you're going to choose to interpret and then respond to this thing we call the flow of life. Now, the word momentum comes up at least twice in that last essay. And Abraham, the collective consciousness Abraham as channeled by the woman that channels him, whose name will come to me, Esther Hicks, is frequently talking about you've got a lot of momentum for the negative, and you don't want to punish yourself for that. You don't want to berate yourself for that. You just want to slow the momentum however you can. Sometimes the best way to slow the momentum is take a nap, go to sleep. Find some way to be gentle with yourself so you slow the momentum in the negative direction. And then, as you wake from the nap or as you start your next activity, you move it a little bit closer towards that positive. Or you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm going to be as positive as I can for as long as I can. And you just keep working at pushing the momentum in the positive direction, training the thoughts that are generated from your intention to stay in line with your fundamental intention to choose the positive, to be more loving, to extend your true nature as love. And as you do that, you build momentum in a more positive direction. And there's a fundamental piece in this that, as Michael Ryce likes to talk about, regulatory speech and the power of our words and thoughts. And the more I listen to him, the more I hear him say things like, and he was talking about it yesterday when he was reading his codependence worksheet, power person worksheet, that if you're in front of the person who triggers you, and a very useful reinterpretation of that has come to me over the years is that no one triggers me. No one or no thing triggers me. Michael Ryce would say, decide rather than choose. I frequently say I choose an interpretation and apply it. He would say, it's the automatic response, it's this reflex, it's a decision, and that choice is a higher spiritual faculty, and I would never choose something that resonates upset in me. So how you ever want to sort that out? However, just observe this for yourself. There are probably things that some people do that you interpret negatively, which if another person did that, you would laugh it off or interpret it as cute. And because of that observation, I've come to understand that no one and no thing triggers me, and yet the decision to apply a particular interpretation to what someone says or doesn't do that I think they should is that mechanism within me that resonates my upset, or that presents a pattern of thought that when I pour my mind energy into it, creates my negative emotional states. So it's not someone triggering me, it's me deciding that what they did is bad or wrong, and here's how I respond when I think something is bad or wrong. So it's the choice or the decision within me to apply an interpretation to something that resonates or recruits from my past, the information that presents me with a state that I call anger or fear or sadness or hurt or guilt or shame, etc. So I realize that we're at the end of our hour. I thank you all for being here and listening. And it's Thursday, so we'll be back tomorrow. There is a support group tonight. If you choose to join us, it's from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. All the information you would need to join us there is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Please remember to stick around or come back for Michael and Jeannie's hour. Blessings.